that. And at the end of the day, we'll all sit around together. I still remember and look at the ledger and say, how much money did you make today? So we would not go home, and Uday used to be sitting, we all used to be eating sev puri and say, how much money did you make today? We were hungry for growth. We were hungry for looking for new opportunities.
I wanted to, begin with maybe the obvious question. I was just thinking, when you joined about, 30, 35 years ago in banking, probably that was a time when, please correct me if I'm wrong, not too many women joined bank, considered banking as a career. So how did you choose to, start as a banker? You're a commerce graduate and you're also a chartered accountant. So was it you or your family?
So I'd say that it was by accident. So I finished my CA final exams. I think it was November 86 or so, if I'm not mistaken. And I was waiting for the results when a friend of mine got a call from Bank of Nova Scotia, a small Canadian bank.
Yeah.
He had applied 6 months ago and he got a job in ICICI already. So he says, why don't you go for an interview? You have to start practicing for interviews. Here I was enjoying my break after hard exams and I went in for the interview. It was such a wonderful interview. The CEO was a Canadian and we had such a great a meeting that at the end of it, he said, just why don't you join the bank? I said, I'm waiting for my results. He said, it's okay. If you fail, we'll see what to do, but we'll give you another chance. And that's how I came into the Bank of Nova Scotia. And I was there for about 4 odd years or so. And about 2.5 years into Bank of Nova Scotia, I met this young man called Uday Kotak, who was going around meeting bankers for bill discounting. And used to talk to him almost every day and acquired Kotak as a client for the bank and really grew the relationship. So at the end of about 4.5 years, when Bank of Nova Scotia was small and I wanted to go to a bigger place, and I had an offer from Deutsche and Standard Chartered. And I went to ask Uday for advice because he was meeting all the banks.
Yeah.
That's when he said, why don't you join me? And I knew that they didn't have an office. They started in the Surrey building, but he said, we are building an office at Narimah Bhavan. Immediately he took me there, showed. And for about 4 months, we were talking and I was thinking, and finally I decided to join. So I think that destiny, I can't say anything else. I wanted to be in financial services. I was very clear from my 10th standard when we had an aptitude, but I had no idea what it meant. And so my very first interview was by accident. My second joining Kotak was also a relationship-based call. And I started by bill discounting. And in Kotak, the rest is history. I'm happy to answer.
Right.
So I'd say quite by accident, but financial services was at the back of my mind.
Right.
But banking specific was destiny.
Can you recall those early days in Kotak? How was it like? Because Kotak was a very, not a well-known company at this point, obviously. It was a...
So when I joined to run the bill discounting desk. And, in about 2 years after I joined, we really had a leadership market share. We basically were discounting bills from vendors and then selling them to banks because banks didn't have that kind of a distribution network and making a margin in between. It was very exciting. Today, when you look at a bank setup, you have a sales, you have credit, you have operations, you have treasury, everything was one. So I was running right from end to end, and literally it was like a trading business model. It was a wonderful model. We had very little capital, very little money, but you made sure that the processes were so good and completely controlled that you made money. So it was very exciting, and it was a one office, and all of us used to be there. And at the end of the day, we'll all sit around together. I still remember and look at the ledger and say, how much money did you make today? So we would not go home. And Uday used to be sitting, we all used to be eating sev puri and say, how much money did you make today? That's where we started. And pretty soon RBI closed the door saying that banks can't rediscount from NBFCs. And then I moved on to capital markets, the Goldman Sachs relationship.
Right.
So I think early days were about discovering what we could do. We were hungry for growth. We were hungry for looking for new opportunities. And from just bill discounting, then we moved into the capital market relationship with Goldman Sachs, capital market, relationship with Ford, we entered mutual funds, insurance, and one by one, and finally banking in 2003. When we launched the bank, we got the license in 2002. Right. So that's really how it was. Small group, very entrepreneurial, very focused on obviously profitability, capital, liquidity, those are the big buzzwords today, but that was really by everyday working, and a wonderfully energetic and buzzing. In fact, I miss those days.
So 30 years, obviously a long time. So when you look back, if I may ask you that, what is the most critical challenge probably you would have faced in those 30 years in your career as you build?
I think every time we scale and every time we got into new areas, I think we started realizing that we needed to operate differently. Like I said, we were used to being entrepreneurs, taking decisions and process, regulation, technology. Slowly, I think you started scaling. In almost every business we entered, we were the last entrant. So when we entered car finance, they were already the top 3. And our aim was very clear. You must get into the top 5, then aim for the top 3 in any business that you enter.
Right.
That's always been the mantra with the group. So then it's really about how do you think differently? And you have to think differently if you're the last in the line and trying to come up with it.
Right.
So the challenge was really scale. Getting in talent, and I remember in the early days of Kotak, mid-90s, I used to go to the IIMs, campuses, sell Kotak, try to hire good people, and some of them are our leaders today, right? So we were involved in the talents that we used to pick. We were involved in everything, and the challenge of scale, challenge of trying to get a market share, challenge of trying obviously to keep up with the growth, profitability. And each year it will be revitalizing actually.
So being a woman, ma'am, I've been interviewing so many bankers over the last few years. So we don't have, the one reality is that in India we don't have too many women at the top, except maybe a handful of them. So typically banking is considered as a male-dominated industry, at least that is the perception generally. I'm not judging it. So was it tough for you to balance, to rise through the ranks, in Kotak?
So
how was your experience?
The number one thing, I can talk about myself.
Yeah.
I never let myself think I'm gender. In the sense, I think in any workplace, and especially if you want to really do well, you've got to forget that you are a different gender, right? You've got to focus on competencies and what it takes for the job, right? You have to deliver and you have to do what it takes for the job.
Right.
So one of the few things is maybe I was lucky, this organization never made me feel that I was a woman and that's different. I was one of them, right? And when we grew, when we sat, when we discussed, when we debated, when we worked long hours, we really, pushed hard to be successful. There was I did not even think I was a woman. For example, I still remember the IPO of Fuse Software, which completely changed capital markets and catapulted Kotak to the first. We finalized the deal at 4 o'clock and broke champagne at 4:30. I was sitting there all night with the team. When there was a pitch to go to California, I flew 21 hours and came back to India. So I think very first and most important, the organization has to be conducive. And you have to get it out of your mind that you are a different gender and you got to focus on competencies. Second, to be practical from a women's perspective, women don't have it easy. To juggle the various roles that a woman plays, many of them give up. So it's not just about the industry being dominated by men. I think it is also about women wanting to succeed, wanting to, move up and being able to manage. For that you need a social fabric, a family fabric, etc. So women don't have it easy. Yeah. And that's something that's nothing to do with gender. It is to do about the way, society is and the fabric of society.